right. Thank you, Kevin. And good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be joining you once again. For those of you who haven't been on the first two, I'll introduce myself briefly. I am Pat O'Keefe. I'm the sports director for News 12 The Bronx, News 12 Brooklyn. Been there since 2007, so I've gotten to cover a lot of Jaspers athletics and a lot of Manhattan College Jaspers baseball games. So I'm really looking forward to this afternoon's conversation with Mike Cole. I'm coming to you from our temporary News 12 sports studio in Tuckahoe, New York. Like many of us, I'm working exclusively out of my home right now. I have a makeshift television studio set up in my basement where I do my broadcasts every night. Among the stories that I've been covering during this time of no sports, as you might imagine, has been unfortunately the cancellation of NCAA spring sports, of which the Manhattan College baseball team found itself right in the middle of, and then the subsequent ruling that came out of that, the NCAA allowing an extra year of eligibility to those COVID-19 scholar athletes who lost who lost an entire season of eligibility. Both things of which we will be discussing with Coach Cole this afternoon. But before we get into that, I do want to welcome in Mike Cole for some initial comments. Coach?
Pat, thanks for having me. I think we have an hour of some stuff that our fans are really going to be on board with here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, especially with our season getting cut short here. But I think this is going to be a great opportunity for some of our fans to reach out and ask some questions of kind of the inner workings of our program and kind of how we go about things. So definitely excited. It's great to see some familiar faces online right now, and I'm excited to get going.
We will allow you, as Kevin said, the opportunity to send in your questions using the chat feature on your Zoom. Coach, let me start off with this. March 11th, you lose a tough game at Sacred Heart. At the time, I don't know if you knew it was going to be your last game of the season. A couple days later at Fairleigh Dickinson, and then, of course, really the world changed and the sports world changed. Walk us through the initial emotions for you and how you had to deal with your student athletes upon learning the news that just like that, the rest of your season was no more.
Right. It was definitely a tough couple of weeks when we did get the news. I actually, right in the middle of our game against Sacred Heart, was when we found out that the Ivy League had canceled their season. So we kind of had an inkling that it was going to trickle down to some other conferences. And it was on Thursday afternoon. I know the MAC basketball championship was going on, and they kind of shut that down, and the MAC decided that we were going to cancel spring sports. So we had a team meeting that afternoon at 3:00, which was probably one of the most difficult things I've had to do as a coach is to let our guys know that, all the hard work that they put in was not for naught, but it was going to be shut down, which was difficult for a lot of our seniors. We had 10 seniors on the team. For them to, just the uncertainty of what was going to happen was very difficult for them to kind of grasp. We had some guys early on that just, as college students, as a coach, not when they're on campus and they're in front of us, their days are structured. They know their class schedule, they know when we're practicing, they know when they're going to lift. And that Friday when they got sent home, it was kind of their daily schedule was kind of turned upside down. So those first couple of weeks, I think, was very difficult for our guys. And just, a lot of people that aren't within the program or don't really know how college baseball works. It's a yearly thing. Our season really starts for our guys during summer ball. All our guys will go out to major league sanctioned summer leagues across the country for June and July, usually that first week of August. And then they're on campus towards the end of August, and we're practicing all fall, all the way up until final exams, and then we're right back on campus kind of in the middle of January going full steam ahead. So the amount of time and effort that those guys put in for the 56 game schedule that we have in the spring, for that to get taken away from them was difficult.
Mike, one of the athletes who I've had the opportunity to speak with during this time and share his story about his season being cut short is your senior pitcher, TJ Stewart, also Manhattan's SAC representative for the current school year.
Right.
He expressed to me how he felt the team, obviously a tough non-conference schedule. His feeling was the team was really just about to pop, just about to turn the corner. Obviously, you always set your schedule to gear up for play in the MAC. Considering you didn't get to that point, especially the timing of everything ending when it did, how disappointing, how tough to take was that?
Right. That's the tough part. I mean, I think every coach in our conference is the early preseason. I know Steve Trimper's online here, and he's been generous enough to let us come down there and play the first weekend the last 2 years. But the preseason is kind of set up. We kind of break it down into preseason, regular season, and postseason is kind of how we look at it in our program. And the preseason is to kind of see where we are. What do we got to get better at? Different combinations of lineups, just trying to figure things out to get us ready for the regular season. And, I think TJ was right. We were right on the cusp of we were 2 weeks away from opening up our regular season in conference play, and we were actually really starting to play well. So that was difficult, and that's what our guys look forward to. Obviously the preseason, they get geared up there those first 5-6 weekends to go play some really good competition. But at the end of the day, we know our conference is, our bread and butter and where we need to play well.
Quit.
Coach, why don't you give us some highlights from the abbreviated season that was?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from our first 14 games was our starting pitching was tremendous. In our 14 starts, I think we probably had 12 quality starts out of our starters in TJ Stewart, Nick Massa, and Jacob Knight. So that was definitely at the forefront of positivity on our first 14 games. Offensively, our lineup was really starting to get going. I thought we had a chance to really have one of the top lineups in our conference. The year before, we started 6 freshmen in the everyday lineup, and those guys were all back this year as sophomores. And we had some older guys, Matt Padre, who has been in the everyday lineup for 3 years. Richie Barella was coming back from injury, who we missed the year before, who was an all-conference player 2 years ago. And then Will Trochiano, who was, on pace to be the rookie of the year in the conference 2 years ago and had two setbacks he actually broke his arm and he tore his triceps. So getting him back and Richie back and Padre in that mix of the 6 freshmen that started every day as freshmen the year before, we were excited. I think our biggest question mark going into the season was our starting pitching. And for us to get the quality starts that we were getting, we were definitely looking forward to getting in the conference.
Couple of weeks after the season was canceled nationwide, of course, the really landmark NCAA vote to allow an extra year of eligibility to spring athletes whose seasons were ended abruptly. In light of that, who is coming back to the Jaspers program next year that maybe you weren't counting on at the beginning of the season?
Right. Right now we have two of our seniors are coming back, in Richie Barella and Jacob Knight. Both of them were actually 5th-year seniors this year. So they had already started their graduate program. Both are coming back to finish their graduate program next year. They're both 18 credits away from getting their master's degrees. So those 2 guys are coming back. We had three seniors in Teddy Sabato, Nick Massa, and Logan Muratella, who all 3 are also coming back. They were coming back, though. All of them had an extra redshirt year, and they were coming back for their 5th year. So those 5 guys are coming back, and all 5 guys are gonna be a huge part of what we do moving forward next year.
It's a different time for all of us, Coach. I know this is an extremely different season for you. Usually you're with your team 24/7 right about now. Now, you're home. I know you have a couple of young kids that you're involved in the homeschooling thing like a lot of us are. Just what has the last month, 6 weeks been like for you in this time of new normal?
It's been crazy. Obviously, I think everybody across our country has been, your life has changed. It's kind of been turned upside down. Kind of how we've tried to approach it at home and with our team is, this isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. So let's turn a negative into a positive. It's definitely been, I think if the baseball thing doesn't work out, I could probably teach 2nd and 4th grade elementary school, dealing with my kids on a daily basis. My wife is also a teacher, so my wife is teaching from 8 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm usually in charge of making sure the kids are staying on top of their stuff. So I don't like to say that we've gotten used to it, but we're dealing with it. So we're definitely looking forward to being able to get outside and get back to some normalcy.
I'll say this. The one thing I learned during this is I'm not cut out to be a first grade teacher or a 3rd grade teacher. It sounds like you're having a little more success with your homeschooling than I am.
Yeah.
With the shutdown, with the quarantine and with people, being separated right now, how are you keeping tabs on your players? How are you keeping in touch with them? And how are they going about their training? Because they're going to return to action at some point. We just don't know when.
Right, of course. And I think every coach, I know we have some of our coaches on here now. The toughest thing or the most difficult thing for us right now is our guys aren't on campus. So we don't know what they're doing every single day. We're in touch with them by text. We're talking to them. We reach out to them every day just to make sure that everything is going okay. I think a big part of what they're doing right now is the summer leagues are still up in the air. So we're kind of treating it, if we can get outside and throw and hit. Some guys have it a little easier than other guys. But we're still kind of treating it like we're going to have summer league baseball. So we want them doing something every day, athletically, baseball-wise. This is also an opportunity for them to get stronger. And it brings me back to my point of let's turn this into a positive instead of a negative, where I think we can, if they really buy into physically changing their bodies, mentally getting on board with that, I definitely think we can come out better on the other side. But no question about it. It's definitely a difficult situation for everybody.
We spoke about the benefits of the ruling to allow students an extra year of eligibility. You're going to get some players back for another year that you weren't otherwise expecting. But on the other side, what are some of the challenges that you and coaches throughout the country are going to face in light of that ruling?
Yeah, well, I mean, from a recruiting standpoint right now, we obviously can't go out and recruit. So it's going to trickle down to every level here. And I think the high school kids, the 20 and 21 classes, I think it's going to affect them because we do have some guys coming back. But we also have, everybody else on the team also got that year of eligibility back. So our freshmen that were freshmen this year are going to be freshmen again next year, with our incoming freshman class. So it's almost like we're going to have 2 freshman classes next year, which I think will affect the recruiting at the high school level. A big thing that's going on right now is how do we financially, within our scholarships, get guys back. And we have some guys right now that I would love to have come back right now that just financially are not going to be able to do it. And I think it's my job to try and get them set up in a place where they can be successful. I think that's the biggest thing. Those seniors that lost this year that still want to play, it's a difficult spot for them right now.
In addition to obviously not playing games and not being with your team right now, other ways that your program and all programs are being affected by the shutdown, recruiting, and you alluded to that a little bit, and scheduling. How has the shutdown affected those two areas of your program?
Yeah, our scheduling right now hasn't been affected too much. I don't know if people on here know. Most of the scheduling is 2-3 years out in advance. So right now our schedule is staying the same of what we had put in place for next year. The only change right now that we've gone through is in our conference, where next year we were actually moving to a 3-day series, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We've always played a doubleheader on Saturday and a single on Sunday. We're going to stick with the Saturday-Sunday format for the 21 season. But other than that, our scheduling has stayed the same. The good thing, the great thing about being in the MAC is our travel within conference is, we're not flying all over the country to play a conference game. Half of our teams are day trips, where we can take a bus and get back on campus that same day and then hop back there on Sunday. So, there's a lot of schools that, for a conference weekend, they're spending $20,000 in travel to go play. That we don't have that problem. Also with our midweek scheduling, Fordham, St. John's, Hofstra, Stony Brook, Army, LIU, Sacred Heart, everybody is within, a half hour to an hour distance, where, it really hasn't affected our schedule.
What is the process for you of putting together a non-conference schedule? Obviously, the goal is, to be at peak performance once the MAC season begins. What is your process when you sit down and try to piece that together?
Right. The preseason for us is usually, it's 5 weekends before our conference schedule starts. So it is a little tricky. I obviously want to put together a tough schedule to get our guys prepared for the rigors of conference play. But you also want to put a schedule together where you can get some wins and have some success with your guys. But from a recruiting standpoint, it's good to have Stetson on our schedule. It's good. Last year we played Michigan in a 4-game series out at Michigan, who lost in the national championship to Vanderbilt. So our kids look forward to playing against the big schools. I think baseball is a little different than some of the other sports in college. A mid-major football team is not going to go down to Alabama and beat them in a football game. Where baseball, we can go to Michigan, or we can go down to UNC, and if we have the right guy on the mound that day, you can compete with anybody in the country.
Now, there's a lot of familiar faces on this call right now, a lot of familiar names. I see Chris Cody, obviously a valuable addition to your staff. Talk about his role, the impact he's had on your staff and on your players.
Yeah, Chris has been tremendous. The first phone call that I made when I did get the job, and I had spoken to Chris throughout the interview process, was to get him on board. And what Chris has done here in 2 years has been tremendous. And what a lot of people don't understand is when I hired Chris 2 years ago, our first day of practice at the end of August was Chris's first day of practice as a coach. And playing 11 years of professional baseball, where primarily your focus is on yourself, trying to get to the big leagues, and how are you going to, get there and achieve your goal of being a major leaguer. And then becoming a coach, where you're kind of in charge of 18 to 20 different pitchers. And what Chris has done as a coach in those 2 years has made a tremendous impact on our program. The biggest thing too that Chris offers to our players is Chris went to school here. Chris sat in the same classrooms that those guys sat in. And he understands what it takes to be a good student at Manhattan. He understands how to, what you need to do to get out of here to be successful. And I think the kids can bounce stuff off of him. He's very easy to talk to. But our pitching staff has, I think if you look at what our starters did this year, Chris is a huge part of that.
In addition to Chris, the names like Joe Jakes and Fabian Pena and Tom Cosgrove and the Jaspers who have gone on to play professionally and continue to play professionally. Just, how much does it help your program to have guys like that to point to? Like, yes, we do put guys on this level and on this track.
Yeah, that's huge. I think in the last 15 years, we've had 32 guys go on to professional baseball. So from a recruiting standpoint, that helps tremendously. And those are the guys that we want to recruit. At the end of the day, I want to get the best players that we can. I want to get guys that, that's their ultimate goal, is to get a Manhattan education, but to get out of here and play professional baseball. And when we bring recruits on campus, for them to see those guys and see that you have the potential of being able to do that, is huge for our program. In baseball, most of those guys, Fabian and Tommy got drafted as juniors, so we don't get them as seniors. But them moving on as juniors is a huge part of our success, being able to go out and recruit top-notch athletes.
Of course, Manhattan College, located right in, the heart of the Bronx and Riverdale, and right across the street, basically, from Van Cortlandt Park. So what can you tell us about the plans for the baseball field and bringing that program back to Van Cortlandt Park, where I think a lot of people want to see you guys?
Right, obviously. That, to be honest with you, was probably the most difficult thing about having our season cut short, because we were coming back to Van Cortlandt this year. Our administration, Mary Ann Riley, Tony Vecchione, President O'Donnell, made some major improvements to our field this year. And that's, when I interviewed for the job, one of the first questions that I asked Mary Ann was, are we coming back to Van Cortlandt? And Mary Ann, being a Manhattan alum and growing up here in Riverdale, she was 100% on board on getting us back to Van Cortlandt. And it was a huge part of our success. Dutchess Stadium was a great place to play. It was it's one of the top. It was probably the best playing field in our conference. At the end of the day, though, we were driving an hour and a half to play a home game at a place that really wasn't ours. So for us to come back to Van Cortlandt, and, I think our teams buy into playing at Van Cortlandt, taking care of the field at Van Cortlandt, but more importantly, it's a place that they could call home. It's a place they could call their own. And that place was a huge part of our success from 2005 to 2013 when we did play our home games there.
And it's a special place. I mean, it's a world-renowned park. It's one of the most famous in the world. I mean, it's a very, very unique home field environment. How can you kind of use that as the home field advantage that it can be?
Yeah, it's an awesome place to play. Every year we resodded the infield and everything. So from a playing surface, the field always played great. But it's different. It's definitely different. It is in a city park, where most colleges, their home field is kind of in the middle of campus, where, we're at Van Cortlandt Park right off of Broadway, which is, one of the busiest streets in the whole country. So it's a different environment for the opposing team when they get there. And I think our guys relish that, walking from the dorms and walking across Broadway to a place that's theirs, that they can really buy into. We're not going to let anybody come in here and push us around. So it was that was a difficult part of our season, getting cut short, of not having those guys have the opportunity to. All the seniors that we have on the team right now have never played a home game at Van Cortlandt. So everybody was looking forward to getting back home.
Well, and here you go, to your point, and Kevin Ross is doing a good job filling up this chat box with a lot of good information. Manhattan won 130 games and lost 34 during a 10-year period. at Van Cortlandt Park from 2005 to 2014. So that's the kind of home field advantage that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it was, we expected to win. We had some really good teams during that time frame there, but a lot of those games were over when the other team got off the bus. Our guys expected to, when the umpire said play ball, we were there to win.
You will return 8 of 9 starters, 7 of them with multiple years of eligibility remaining next year. Experienced pitching staff. You'll have a 5th-year senior, a couple of 6th-year seniors. Is that going to be different for you? And if so, how?
No, I don't think it's going to be different because I think it's, I think we're looking at it as a positive. We're getting a lot of guys back that have had a ton of experience. We have 7 newcomers coming in that I think will add to that experience. But we have some guys that have been through the grind. They understand what it takes to be successful at this level. I think they're eager to get back. Our goal from day one when I got the job was to win MAC championships. And I think we're at a point now from a talent standpoint where we can go out there and we can compete with anybody in our conference. And our guys are looking forward to getting back and to bringing that MAC championship back to Riverdale.
I want to talk a little about the history of the Jaspers baseball program. Next year, the 15th anniversary of that 2006 MAC title team. Of course, the famous win over Nebraska, also San Francisco. What are your memories of that team? I know we have Cody on, who was such a huge part of that. Your memories of that, the history of the Jaspers, and how important that link is to the current players.
Yeah, I think it's crazy to think that was already 15 years ago. But, that team and Coach Trimper, who was on here, who recruited, pretty much everybody on that team, kind of set the tone for Jasper baseball here the last 15 years. What I will say about that 06 team is there was a ton of talent on that team. I think we had 7 guys that went on to play professional baseball, but they were blue collar guys that showed up every day to go to work. They weren't scared of, playing big teams. We opened the season that year at Tulane. It was actually after the hurricane down there, and they were ranked 5th in the country, and Chris actually shut them out. We won 1-0. So that kind of set the tone for the rest of the season that we can compete against anybody in the country. And when we did go out to Nebraska, there was 12,000 people there, and I think we might have had 100 in the stands for us. So nobody in that stadium and nobody in the country thought we actually were facing Jabba Chamberlain, who was, he was in the big leagues at August. Nobody thought that we had a chance to win. The only people that thought that we had a chance that day were the 30 guys that were on that bus. And when we walked off that bus that day, we expected to win. And we had an All-American pitcher on the mound who shut them down. We hit back-to-back homers in the 2nd inning. And, that was kind of the storybook kind of, I don't want to say ending to a season because we went on to beat San Francisco the next day. But it was, that team was as good as anybody in the country.
How much is that brought up, years later, coming up on 15 years later, how, when the guys get together and the guys talk about that, how much is that great time in your lives brought up?
Yeah. The last 2 years that I've been at school here, 4 of those guys have gone into the Hall of Fame. So Chris, Matt Rosati, Nick Durba, and Johnny Fitzpatrick, there's a couple other guys on that team that'll eventually be in the Hall of Fame. But no, it's talked about a lot. I mean, Chris was on Baseball America, on a chat on Baseball America last week, replaying the game. So, it's in our eyes, we didn't see it as an upset. I think in college baseball, it's kind of looked at that it was a huge upset. But no, it gets talked about a lot. The big thing about that game, though, is that team set up. That team allowed us to go out and recruit. And if you look at the teams that we had after that 06 team, I think the '07 team might even have been a little bit better. And we just got, we played against a Lemoyne team that was also, Lemoyne had 3 guys that made it to the big leagues. But we were able to go out and get the Marco Onoratis, the Chad Salems, the Fabian Peñas, that let them win the 11 and 12 MAC championship. So that's the biggest thing, is people always ask, how important was it? It was huge. It was huge. It set the program up to be able to move forward and to really compete with anybody in the Northeast.
And Fabian Peña, you mentioned him. He just hopped on. Good to see him. I know Joe Jakes is listening in. Here's a question, and I'll remind everyone joining us, you can submit questions for Coach Cole on the chat feature here on your Zoom. Question from Pete. He's an alum. The MAC Conference basketball teams appear to be struggling with players entering the transfer portal. He wants to know if that is an issue with baseball.
Right now, there's some kids, some of the graduating seniors from teams around conference are jumping into the portal. The portal is usually, right now, it's about 150 to 200 people in the portal. I think it's up to around 700 right now. So it is, we actually, TJ Stewart jumped into the portal. And it's going to take his opportunity to go and play his 5th year at Florida Atlantic. So it's definitely affected everybody in the country. I think right now myself and our assistant coaches are on that portal all day long, trying to see if we can find some guys that are looking to get a master's degree in New York City that can help us out for 1 year.
I want to go back to asking you about the field, and there is a desire to name it after Joe Capo, who obviously one of many who lost his life on September 11th. Manhattan College and the school, near and dear to his heart his entire life. What can you say about Manhattan's hopes to name the field in his honor?
Yeah, it's we've put a push. Right now we have a committee of about 30 people that are really pushing to make some major upgrades at Van Cortlandt, to put some turf in, to really kind of take our program to the next level. And at the forefront of that is to rename the field after Joe Capo. Joe was a 1975 graduate from Manhattan. He's a Hall of Famer here at school. And tragically, he did lose his life working for Cantor Fitzgerald on 9/11. But I think it's a great opportunity to recognize him. Joe got drafted out of high school and came to Manhattan and had a great career here at Manhattan, and stayed with Manhattan after he got out of here. The baseball program was near and dear to his heart. And it's definitely something that we really want to make happen.
Yeah, it's certainly a worthy cause that Manhattan is taking up, so we look forward to that. A couple more questions coming in, Coach. Swing it back to recruiting, and where geographically does Manhattan have the best relationships?
Right. As a head coach, always you want to get the best kids in your backyard. I think we've done a good job of, if you look back on those, 06, 11, 12 teams that won MAC championships, the key players on most of those teams were local kids, whether, playing in the Catholic schools in New York City, some Long Island kids, some Westchester kids from Iona Prep. And our goal every year is to try and get the best kids from the city. And I think we've done that since we've gotten back here. One of our freshmen this year, Alfredo Delgado, who stepped in and was our starting first baseman this year, is a Fordham Prep kid who helped Fordham Prep win the Catholic City Championship last year. He was actually the MVP of the city. Cherry Abreu from St. Raymond's, Jose De La Cruz from GW. So we really wanted to get back to getting the local kids here. With that being said, though, in 2005, and I think Coach Shrimper is probably still on the phone here, we went down to Florida, to the Miami area, and we were able to, Eric Nieto, who's now the head of amateur scouting for the Detroit Tigers, was our first Florida commit in 2005. Since 2005, we've had 40 players from the state of Florida that have played here in Manhattan. So locally, we want to get the best kids, but we have a little niche down in Florida where we're able to go down there and kind of try and not steal some players, but we've been able to get some really, really good players from the state of Florida.
For players from Florida or elsewhere throughout the country, how much of a draw and how much of a sales pitch is Manhattan College's location?
Yeah, I think the location, obviously Miami, the weather is a little bit different, but it's it has that city feel to it where Manhattan is the same way. A big thing with the Florida kids is a lot of them have some roots up here, whether it be in New York City or in the New Jersey area. So they're familiar with it. Another thing too is that 06 team, when we did beat Nebraska, we lost to Miami in the regional finals. So it still resonates down there where, people know Manhattan from playing Miami. But we've been able to go down there and we have relationships built with a lot of the Catholic schools down there too. In Manhattan being a Catholic school, a lot of those kids want to continue their education up here. And the education at Manhattan, we're in the business capital of the world. So for them to get a business degree from Manhattan, it kind of sets them up. If they don't go on to play professional baseball, they're going to be set up for the next 40 years of their life.
Question here about the alumni game, how it's looking this year, because apparently Simonetti says that he's still got some gas left in the tank.
I believe it. The alumni game, hey, if we're back on campus, it's going to happen. And I expect Simonetti to get the ball. No, the alumni game is a huge part of what we do here at Manhattan. I think last year we had 40 guys come back to the alumni game, which kind of speaks volumes to what this program means to them. And it's always, as a coach, it's always great. This is why we do it, is to see those guys come back with their families. A lot of those guys on those 05, 06, 07 teams have kids now. So to have those guys come back and put the uniform on one more time, I think it is huge for our program.
We've already spoken about how different things are with no baseball happening right now and how different recruiting is. But that being said, what can you tell us about newcomers who will be joining the program next year?
Yeah, right now we have seven newcomers coming in, 4 pitchers, a middle infielder, a catcher, and kind of a two-way outfielder, left-handed pitcher. So it is, we're excited about the guys that are coming in. I think we're going to be a little bit older next year. This is kind of the first time I talked earlier on how we started 6 freshmen last year, where, we're not, it's difficult for a freshman to come in and get 150 to 200 at bats or to get 50 to 70 innings on the mound as a freshman. But I think we're at a point from a recruiting standpoint now where we can really bring some guys in to develop them. And, by the time they're sophomores and juniors, that can really, really help us.
You mentioned earlier how, you're scouring the transfer portal. Obviously, it's a lot more full than at any time previously. I think one of the reasons also the Major League Draft is, I think, cutting back from 45 to like 10 rounds. Is there opportunity, not, for obviously your school is what we're talking about, but schools across the country to dip into that pool a little bit more because of everything that's going on?
Yeah. I mean, the portal right now is a huge part of recruiting. I think a lot of the bigger schools, the draft right now is probably only going to be 5 rounds instead of 40 rounds. So a lot of those juniors that they expected to get drafted from the 5th to the 20th round and have them sign are now coming back to school. So it's going to be, they're going to have to make some choices. Do we bring those juniors back, or you know, a lot of those schools have 15 freshmen that are coming in their class, and it's going to be pretty hard for them to kind of juggle the scholarships. You know, baseball-wise, we're only allowed to be at 11.7 scholarships. So a lot of those schools are going to be over the 11.7, which is, you know, there's going to be freshmen that are available in July and August, and there's going to be, you know, those juniors that were supposed to be draft picks that are going to be available in July and August.
Unless anybody has any more questions, Coach, I will give you an opportunity for some closing comments as we get set to close our session today.
Yeah, no, I thought this was great, Pat. You know, I definitely see a lot of familiar faces online. It's, you know, we're going through a tough time here in our country. So for us to kind of get away here for a half hour and kind of talk baseball, I think has been awesome. But our guys are working hard. Right now they're finishing up classes. We have one more week of school, and then they're on to finals. Hopefully we can get some summer ball in this year, but our guys are definitely busting their butt in the classroom, and they're doing the best that they can to get better on the baseball side of things. So, you know, I touched on it earlier. We're trying to turn this into a positive. You know, and we're definitely looking forward to on campus. We're looking forward to getting back to Van Cortlandt Park next spring. But no, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and letting me on.
Well, we miss seeing you and your players out there on the field. I mean, there's nothing that I think any of us would rather be doing now than taking in a baseball game, considering everything that's going on right now. So the quicker we can get back to that, the better. But, you know, it's great to get your thoughts on a variety of topics. I know that a lot of your fans and former players and current players really appreciate hearing your voice. And, again, thanks to the folks at Manhattan College, Whitney and Kevin and everyone else for putting this together and giving us some sort of sports content to talk about on a weekly basis with these coach conversations. So I look forward to the next one, Mike, and it was great chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks, Pat.
Kevin?
Thanks, Coach Cole, Pat, for the successful third coaches conversation. This was tremendous. Once again, this will be archived on our YouTube page. So if anybody that missed it wants to send it to, if anybody wants to send it to people that may have missed it, we ask you please do that. Also, any updates for the Jaspers baseball program, you can follow on Twitter at Jaspers Baseball, as well as the website, www.gojaspers.com. Thank you so much again. And we also look forward to seeing you next Friday, May 8th at 12 o'clock, when we welcome head women's basketball coach Heather Boulin for the fourth installment of Coaches Conversation. So we ask that everybody please be safe and healthy, and we'll see you next week.